My name is Daisy Martinez, and for my kinesiology 3347 project, I decided to do my study over the relationship between general nutrition and knowledge and dietary quality in elite athletes. For the publication information, the article was published in the 25th volume, issue number 3 of the International Journal of Sports Nutrition and Exercise Metabolism in 2015. The researchers of the article were a group of Australian researchers, and I went ahead and copied the link to the article in case anybody wanted to read it. And the purpose of this study is pretty much in the name, to determine the relationship between having a general knowledge of general nutrition and the quality of an athlete's diet. Also, there was some curiosity amongst the researchers and how demographics can affect one's dietary intake. It is known that athletes take into consideration what they consume and how the food that they eat will affect their performance. With that being said, nutritional knowledge has not been proven to have an influence on dietary intake, hence the reason for the study. So when it comes to the participants, in total there were 101 athletes, 37 were males and 64 were females. The participants in the group of athletes were considered to be either greater than or equal to the state level of competition in Australia, and they needed to be at least the age of 16. Also, the athletes were to be recipients of monetary scholarships from the Australian government. And there were also participants from the elite rugby team who competed in the Australian National Youth Competition, and they were used to increase the number of participants, and the rugby players were aged from 18 to 20, and all the participants were kept anonymous, and a written form of consent was required for those athletes that were younger than 18 years old. So when it comes to the design, the participants first had to complete what is called the General Nutrition Knowledge Questionnaire, or the GNKQ, which was a questionnaire that tested the nutritional knowledge in both the United Kingdom and Australia. After 2 weeks of taking the GNKQ, the athletes completed another dietary assignment known as the Food Frequency Questionnaire. And this questionnaire required that the participants answer questions revolving around their diet, such as certain foods that they eat, and the serving sizes, and how often they eat those foods. In order to find the dietary qualities of the athletes, the researchers used a version of the Australian Recommended Food Score, or the ARFS. The ARFS is determined by dietary recommendations within Australia, and each of the athletes' questionnaires were scored using the ARFS, which offers scores based off of certain food groups and how many times the foods were eaten. And the data from the questionnaires were analyzed using the IMB-SPSS statistics. So the results that came from the study revolving participant characteristics, the demographic background of the athletes were summarized via a table, and the table consisted of data such as sex, age, levels of competition, and living situations, and a couple other categories. Within the participants, females made up about 63% of the athletes, with most being aged from 16 to 18 and taking part in team sports instead of individual sports. And the mean for ages amongst all the participants was around 18, with most competing at either the national or international level in their sports. On the GNKQ, the athletes were scored at about 58%. With that being said, the highest scored portion within the questionnaire was the section on the knowledge of dietary recommendations, so sizing and stuff like that. The overall GNQ score was higher amongst females than males by about 4%, and there were really no notable differences between the scores of those who were younger or older than 18, or any other noticeable differences between the different levels of expertise in sports. And the results when it comes to the dietary intake, when looking at the results of the ARFS, the overall score was about 34 out of 64 points, which is about 53%. The highest areas of scores were those focused around water intake, condiments and sauces, fruits, and grains with dairy. And the results, so pretty much is their relationship between nutritional knowledge and dietary quality. There was a positive weak relationship between the scores of the GNKQ and the ARFS. There was only one significant relationship between the GKQ and the ARFS scores, and that was found in the section amongst vegetables. There was also some positive correlations between parts A and D. And then I went ahead and re-put the link to the article because in case anybody wanted to look at the tables and charts that I recommended or said above. So in conclusion from this study, it is evident that there is a positive weak relationship when it comes to having a general knowledge of foods and one's dietary intake. The results show that although it is beneficial to have some understanding of nutrition, there are other requirements that must be acknowledged. Athletes and the general public must have also nutritional support along the way, with also the knowledge to necessarily be successful and beneficial and benefit in one's dietary intake.